Whipple, you say?
Whippo.
Whipple. Uh-huh.
He was a German.
Uh-huh. And he bought the property.
W-I-P-P-O.
W-I-P-P-O. Uh-huh.
Uh-huh. And he bought the Ruiz property.
Uh-huh. And that's right along the bayou there.
Right on the bayou where Thomas is.
Where did Captain Holbrook live now?
Well, now he lived in the village.
He was in the village.
In the village,
Uh-huh.
and this place, of course, I suppose, was abandoned property.
Was it on
After
Broadway?
the 21 storm. Yes, I believe somewhere on Broadway.
Uh-huh.
And so I suppose he just decided he could use it for that. It was a good site, and no one seemed to be around to bother him and to object. And that was before we became interested in it and realized that Uncle Johnny had owned it. Uncle Johnny, was in failing health and quite old. And when I married Frank, my husband, in 36, he told me that we wanted to find a place to get away on weekends and for summer vacations. And he had all of this property and had it. And he had a portfolio filled with tax deeds and deeds to the property. He had lost a lot of it after the crash and after the boom burst.
Mm-hmm.
And so he told us to look through and see the places that would be practical for us to, would be near Tampa that we could come to on weekends. And so we looked at Mariposa Key. He owned a great deal of that. And
Where's Mariposa Key?
It's down beyond Casey Key, I believe.
Oh, it's down near Englewood.
In the Englewood, in that area. And I can't remember all of various places, but we went different weekends. We'd take the description, and we had Doberman at the time, 2 Doberman. We'd put them in the station wagon and take off and for the weekend. So to look at these different places. So after looking at all of the others, some of them were islands that we had to get to by boat. It was difficult to find a boat at short notice to get to it. And so we decided when we saw this, that this was the most practical, the one that was nearer to Tampa and the one most easily gotten to. And there was no bridge then, and we had to come all the way through Sarasota and back down the Key. And in those days, later on, of course, we had to find out the schedule of the strafing so that we would know whether we would have to wait a couple of hours when we were coming down the Key on the other side.
Where did they strafe? This was
right where the trailer park is. Was a strafing range.
And this, of course, obviously was during World War II.
World War II, right. Mm-hmm. And that was later on, of course. But when we came down, we named it Land's End. Obviously, because it was.
Sure. Natural.
No way to get off.
Now, when you originally you came down, you looked it over and maybe stayed here. Did you camp here?
We saw that. It was being used, and Captain Holbrook wasn't very pleased to see us appear and have us explain to him who we were. You see, because I think he had been here 5 or 6 years, and I think the. What was at the time was 7 years in those days.
Squatters'
rights. You would gain squatters' rights if you had it. So anyway, we didn't do anything immediately, but we arranged for it, and we paid the taxes, and we paid Uncle Johnny very little now in the light of the way things have turned out. But then we started building in 37. We'd come down in Frank would bring the material down in his truck with my sister. And I would come bring the station wagon and mother in with me. And we would have cooked all of the things for our
Yeah.
for the weekend and bring it down.
How long did it take you to build the house?
It took us, I think, to
Several
finish
years?
it. Yes, because we finally we rented it. Millie handled. We finally got it built and furnished after a fashion. Millie Johnson handled it for us. They would, so finally we didn't plan to rent it, but finally she called one time and wanted to know if we would rent it for the winter. That this doctor and his wife were here, and that he had made a proposition to us that we had a shallow well, and the water certainly wasn't, certified or very. We didn't know whether it was good to drink. But anyway, he said that he would pay for a deep well and pay it and give us the money in advance for the winter if we would have a deep well there. So that's the way we got our artesian well.
I'll be darned.
And
you don't remember the doctor's name?
I can't remember.
Well, that's not important.
No.
When did Millie and Jean Johnson come? Were you here when they?
No, they were here when we came.
So they
37. They must have come before that.
I heard, and I haven't been able to confirm it because I haven't had a chance to talk to Gordon, but that they had come down from Chicago, the same area that
she was one of the Harvey girls,
Is that right?
Yes, Millie. And Jean, they were the most opposite couple you ever. He looked like a Harvard professor, and she looked like a Harvey girl. She had the most beautiful legs, but she was very fat.
I'll be darned.
And she had a laugh that you could hear across the road at 2:00 in the morning. The Chicago, what were the White Sox? The
Boston Red Sox.
The Boston Red Sox. This was their headquarters, and they would come in from Bradenton, or from wherever they were, Sarasota, and they'd come in and have these big parties, really party. And they say that Millie, I had never seen her do it, but they say that she would pick them up bodily and throw them out if they got too drunk. She'd pick them up herself.
She was that strong.
Oh, yes. And you could hear her laugh. She'd pour a tumbler full of bourbon and put a little ginger ale on the top, and keep that going all night. She was a real character.
I have some other reminiscences on tapes here. I think Howard Ridyard and Ansel and they're saying the same thing.
And she had everything that she cooked. Was from scratch. She made the most delicious Parker House rolls, the most delicious coconut cake. We were over there one evening with Jack, and gone by for a beer or something. And Jack was Frank's brother and visiting us. And he said, "Millie, how much will you charge me for just to smell your coconut cake?" She said, 15 cents. So she did it like this and took it back. Oh.
Yeah. Well, that's very interesting. Now, Wickersham then was still alive and living across the bayou.
And he and Frank were very much interested in hypnotism. And so I think that was the main point of reference that they had for each other, that they would discuss that at great length at 4:00 in the morning twice.
This Wickersham, did he think that maybe the use of hypnotism might help his condition?
I don't know. I didn't get into it because I really had no patience with it myself.
Let me ask you something about the bayou here. When you came here, was the bayou all cut off?
Completely sanded over. There was we could walk from our house to Frank Wickersham's over white sand. There was nothing, no water at all. And there was a stagnant pool back here, and the Ruisses lived next door, and they had the 2 little children, and there was just a mosquito, just a horrible condition, because it was a stagnant pool of water way back. And in fact, all the length of our property was all sand, just all the way over.
Uh-huh. When did Wickersham put his seawall in there?
Well, he put it there shortly after we arrived, because Frank had discussions with him about if that was his property line, and he said, sure, that was it.
And then later on, I guess it was Jim Johnson or somebody must have taken a dredge and cut a channel through there.
Yes, we used to come down sporadically then. Sometimes we'd come, it would be 2 or 3 weekends. It was in the winter that this happened, that we discovered that while we were away, Jim Johnson had built a homemade dredge and had come down willy-nilly and cut a new channel.
Didn't follow the old.
We were very glad to have it opened up, but we thought at that time and realized that he had taken some of our land, a good deal of it was on the other side. So we asked Frank Wickersham again. Frank talked to him, and he said, you told me that this was your property line, your seawall, and is that, I want to find out if that's so, because I have to do something about this land of ours that's on the other side. And he said, that's exactly it. He said that I put the seawall there, that was my property line. So we went to Carl Whitaker in Tampa and told him what had happened. And he said, there's nothing for you to do. The burden of proof is on you now, because it's a fait accompli and it's already happened.
Well, who claimed ownership of that?
It was on the other side of the bayou, so it was just a part of that property.
In other words, it would be
the crane fixture people bought it from Frank Wickersham, or there may have been someone in between. But I know at one time he owned it, Crane owned it. And then Crane, it was sold to a man by the name of, I guess Crane was the one that left it after Frank died.
Frank died,
and Crane bought it. And then I think in settling the estate when he died, Crane bought it. And I believe he was the one that gave it as a gift to New College. You see, New College, it was given to New College as a gift. Then they sold it, the development department sold it to a man by the name of Jones, I believe his name was. And it was from Jones that Michael and Neil Saunders and my daughter Joni bought it. Nice. And of course, but when we went to Carl Whitaker in Tampa, he told us the burden of proof was on us, and we had no money to go into it. He said it would be a very expensive proposition. We would have to have geodetic surveys and land surveyors and so forth, and that it would cost a great deal of money, and we must understand that. So we decided it just, that we couldn't afford it.
When did you move here permanently?
In '59, when the bridge went across.
When the bridge opened?
The bridge opened.
And at that time, was Frank in a semi-retired position, or what was his?
Well, Frank was, when the bridge came across, he said they had ruined the place by putting the bridge there, and that all we could do would be to go into business, open a marina. So we had Meissner McAvoy build a dock for us, and we decided we were going to move the house down to the point.
Yeah.
But we found that we would have to build a bait and tackle shop 15 feet back from the dock. It would be, and so we decided that we would just use this part. It was such a small operation that we'd use the front of the cottage and live in the back.
And you would be right on the water.
We would be right on the water, right.
Didn't you say that when your uncle, John Savarese, built his house, that the channel was, Longboat Pass was about, 85 or so feet further north of the present shoreline?
Yes.
And that his house, if it were here today, would be literally where the water is.
Right in the middle of the water. Yeah. Right.
The
erosion has been so terrific.
Did he have an artesian well or anything?
Yes, he did. He had the reason we know is that after the house was gone and after we came down here, about 25 or 30 feet from shore when we were swimming. We would have this cold stream of water, and we discovered there was a pipe there that was coming out of the sand, and it was cold artesian water coming out of it. It has since rusted. And
it reminds me of Gordon Whitney, who told me that when the erosion started and he had to keep moving the houses back, they had this artesian well, and ultimately the pipe from the well wound up out in the Gulf, and the birds would fly around and get fresh drinking water out of there. He had a picture I wish I could get a hold of them drilling for oil out there.
Oh, really?
And this particular picture was taken just as they detonated a large charge of dynamite, and there's a big flash of the.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I wish I knew.
Are they still down here?
Guy Pascal was one of the unusual people and a friend of yours. Can you tell me a little bit about that barn he lived in? Do you remember what it looked like?
It was absolutely terrific, and it just killed us when we found out that it was being destroyed and done away with. It was large enough to have, the central part of it was 2 stories, went from the ceiling to the roof to the peaked roof. It had a barn door that you could drive a Volkswagen, or I assume any car, in during a storm. It had these very large dimensioned timbers that went up to the roof, and on 2 of them there was a very huge Pauly Island type hammock swung, and there were window seats all on each side of the room, but at each end it was partitioned off, and on one end was the kitchen with a balcony above it, and on the other end was the bedroom with a balcony above it.
You mentioned something about pianos. Did they have more than one?
Yes, they had one on each balcony, grand pianos. And the friends of Guy Pascal's, one was a concert pianist, and the other was a very accomplished musician. And on occasions, one would get at each piano at the opposite ends of the house, and it was really a great music evening to hear them play.
The guy had a lot of animals out there around his place, and somebody said he had an emu and some chickens.
And he used to have shelves, feeding shelves outside the windows with spotlights so that you could see them from the inside, and the coons would come at night, and there could have been sometimes anywhere from 50 to 100 coons all on all the shelves eating.
Somebody said they had some bathtubs or something out there in their yard.
They did have.
They didn't take baths.
They're hazy about that. I don't know. They could have. You mean
the guy?
The people?
Yeah.
Yes, right.
Well, I thought maybe they used them for a drinking trough for the animals.
No, I think that my recollection is that they used them to take baths, and they could have well done it because it was a very isolated spot where no one but the animals would see them.
Anyway, Guy he always is experimenting with everything.
I know. Oh, I know. He's a very terrific person.
You said that when you first came here, Guy Pascal was awfully friendly and would come by a lot and do a lot of unusual things. Can you recall some of these things?
Yes, I can recall one time seeing him coming through the doorway on his hands with his feet up in the air, and walked across the room on his hands. And I think it was the first time I had ever seen him and ever met him. And
Well, had he been drinking, or is he just doing it for
Well, I
devilment?
think it's safe to say he might have been drinking.
When Guy was here, he said he came here about 41. Is that about the time you remember him coming here?
Well, that's about the time that we would have been here and had the house completed to a point where we would have could have stayed overnight or used it for a weekend.
One of the things that, as I understand it, brought about incorporation was the fact that for several weekends a large number of blacks came out here on the island. And you don't remember that?
No, I don't.
Yeah, I see. Do you recall the fire that they had the Sleepy Lagoon Club? Were you here at that time, 1953?
No, we were just not down here. The house was here.
Yeah.
We didn't come regularly in those days.
I see. Well, that's right. You didn't. You
No.
said you permanently moved here
In 59,
What
right.
happened to Mont Risley?
Well, Mont was a very good friend of ours because we felt that he was sort of a connection since my he was related to my Uncle Johnny's wife, who had been Nellie Risley. And so when we started coming down weekends and on a regular basis, well, Monty would come by to see if we were down, and then he would come and spend a lot of the time here with us.
He's a great fisherman, wasn't
He was a great fisherman, and he loved, it would take my sister, loved to fish, and they would go out, and Frank, and fish. And, well, he would just stay with us the weekend while we were here, come and go. And so time went on, and he had some connection or some friends somewhere in the north, I believe in the Chicago area. And we would come and go as we usually did, but Monty was away, and all of a sudden we discovered that they had found, he had never reached his destination wherever he was going, just absolutely disappeared. His bicycle, he had ridden a bicycle to the bus station in Sarasota, and they knew that it was his bicycle, and that was the only thing they ever heard from him again, that his bicycle was there and he had disappeared.
No one ever heard from him after that?
No one ever heard from him again.
When was that about? Was that was it after you had moved here permanently?
No.
This is before that?
No, this was about 48.
I see.